Hello and welcome to the Authentic Freedom Virtual Church. My name is Lori Lumby, and I am the pastor and spiritual director of this online virtual community. Let me read to you for a moment from our mission statement. We are a community of men and women who consider Jesus to be our teacher while honoring the spiritual truths inherent within all sacred traditions. We recognize the divine as that which is within us, outside of us, and present within all of creation, and which can be acknowledged by any name, image, or presence. We believe in the inherent potential of all human beings to become self-actualized, and we acknowledge the spiritual journey as a formative tool in this endeavor. We believe in the law of love, and seek to know more fully the love of the divine that dwells within us, and which seeks to be known in the world through us, in service to the betterment of our world. Let us pause for a moment in silence as we allow our minds, our hearts, our beings to receive God's nourishment for us today. Nehwe Savianoch Aikana Debash Mayav Bara Nehwe Savianoch Aikana Debash Mayav Bara Nehwe Savianoch Aikana Debash Mayav Bara Nehwe Savianoch Aikana Debash Mayav Bara. This is the phrase from the Aramaic Lord's Prayer, which is most commonly translated as, on heaven as on earth, or on earth as it is in heaven. What this phrase tells us, or invites us to be aware of, is that God has a plan. God has a plan and a vision for what the world is supposed to be looking like. Not only does God have a plan, but God has a plan for us in the facilitation and creation and manifestation of God's vision for a loving, harmonious, and peaceful earth. God has a plan, and each and every one of us has a critical role in that plan. Towards that end, God has uniquely gifted each and every one of us, uniquely gifted us with our own specific talents, passions, spiritual and physical gifts. In addition to giving us these unique and special gifts, God has also planted within each and every one of us an awareness of how we are called to use those gifts. First, for our own fulfillment, so that we might find meaning, purpose, fulfillment, and connection in our lives. But secondly, and probably more importantly, that each of us is called, through the use of our unique gifts, to help bring about the betterment of our world. Each and every one of us plays a critical role in the fulfillment of God's vision and God's plan. And the world that we see today is clear demonstration that the majority of us are not keeping up our side of the bargain. instead of the world of love that God envisions and seeks to be made through us, through our participation and agreement. Instead of that world, we have a world of fear, of hatefulness, of prejudice, of all kinds of isms, racism, nationalism, sexism, ageism, gender orientationism. Instead of a world of love and harmony that God intended for the world to be, we have a world filled with strife. And in that strife-filled world, the majority of humanity is sick. Sick with fear, sick with emotional and mental challenges, sick with physical maladies and disease. One of the things that I have come to understand is that the majority of our human diseases, physical, emotional, or mental, or all of the above, the majority of the maladies that we experience in the human condition are a direct result of ignoring the voice of our soul, of ignoring the gifts that God has given us, ignoring the voice within that tells us how we are compelled to use those gifts for our own fulfillment and for the betterment of the world. I have come to understand and see the lived proof that the majority of our maladies in the human condition are a direct result of ignoring the voice of our gifts and the call of our soul. This is the truth that is expressed in this Sunday's gospel. When we ignore the voice of our soul, when we deny the talents and the gifts that God has given us, when we ignore that voice that calls us to seek after fulfillment and meaning and purpose in our lives, when we ignore that, we experience wailing and gnashing of teeth. We experience suffering. We experience anger and frustration, impatience, fear, longing, restlessness, hatred. If we are unable to deal with these emotions within ourselves, we project them outside of us. And then we make somebody else the enemy. Somebody else then becomes the target of our own unacknowledged fear, guilt, shame over ignoring the call of our soul. One thing I want to make very clear is that this suffering is not a punishment. This Sunday's gospel, unfortunately, is sometimes interpreted as if to say that God punishes us for not using our gifts. That could not be further from the truth. If we believe in an unconditionally loving and merciful God, then God can't punish us for living out our fear instead of acknowledging the voice of our gifts. Instead, God holds us in compassion. God holds us in compassion and holds us with the deep intention and desire that we would ask for healing. That we would ask to be healed of the fears that are causing us to ignore the voice of our truth, the voice of our gifts, and the call of our soul. God is waiting for us to ask to be healed of this pain so that we can enjoy the freedom that God promised us. When we listen to the voice of our soul, when we take time to identify, cultivate, nurture, and then eventually share our gifts in the world, then we experience true freedom. The kind of freedom that God promised us, which is a freedom that is only known within us. It is a sense of expansiveness, which gives us a profound and enduring experience of inner peace, of contentment, of love, and of joy. When we ask God to heal us of the fears that keep us from listening to the voice of our gifts and the call of our soul, we find freedom. But this freedom is not just for ourselves. When we find that place of inner freedom within, we are then compelled and empowered to share what we have come to know with others. To share with others the freedom that we have experienced in knowing our own giftedness, so that others too may experience this freedom. If we want peace in our world, if we want harmony and understanding, if we want to experience the fullness of what God envisioned our human experience to be, it has to start there. It has to start with our own inner denial, our own inner resistance, our own inner fear of our magnificent giftedness and the way in which God is calling us to share those gifts in the world. This week, my invitation for you is to return to the Agape newsletter that was published on this website Thursday morning, and go to the spiritual practice that gives you an opportunity to be open to receiving God's healing, to be open to being freed of the fears that keep you from tending to your gifts and listening to the call of your soul. This coming week, I invite us to not only be open to God's healing, but to ask for God's healing. This is what God is waiting for us to acknowledge that we can't do this alone, but that we sincerely and wholly are in need of God's healing love and God's healing presence, so that we can say yes to God's call to bringing heaven on earth. Before I close, I just want to offer this reminder. If you have found this to be supportive, inspiring, helpful in your own spiritual journey, I invite you to support the ministries of Authentic Freedom Ministries through a financial donation or through your own prayers and intentions, or to share these services with those that you think would also find them helpful. And I will close this service today again with the Aramaic Lord's Prayer, as on earth as it is in heaven. Nehwe Savianach Aikana Debashmaya Baga. Nehwe Savianach Aikana Debashmaya Baga. Nehwe Savianach Aikana Debashmaya Baga.